June 6, 1944. As dawn broke over Normandy, more than 160,000 Allied troops began the largest seaborne invasion in history. The beaches stretched before them like vast killing fields, fortified by years of German preparation. But what if success had slipped through their grasp? What were the hidden German responses that almost turned D-Day into a disaster? Tonight, we explore the razor's edge between triumph and catastrophe. We'll uncover German defensive strategies that historians rarely discuss, examine decisions made in split seconds that shaped the fate of millions, and reveal how close the Allies came to being driven back into the English Channel. Could a few critical hours have changed the fate of the world? What if Hitler had woken up just 3 hours earlier? Allied plans and their hidden flaws. The Allied forces spent months planning Operation Overlord, aiming for total surprise and rapid victory. General Dwight Eisenhower famously said, "Plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." Yet despite intense preparation involving thousands of planners, reconnaissance flights, and mock exercises across England, the massive scale of the invasion exposed deep vulnerabilities that would nearly prove fatal. Many American and British units landed off course due to strong currents and navigational errors. The weather, which had already delayed the invasion by 24 hours, created treacherous conditions. Paratroopers from the 101st and 82nd Airborne Divisions found themselves scattered across hedgerows and swamps. "We were lost, surrounded by water, and almost completely alone," recalled Private Frank Lilly. "I couldn't see my squad. I couldn't see anyone. Just darkness, water, and the sound of German voices." The airborne drops, intended to secure key bridges and road junctions, turned into a navigational nightmare. Anti-aircraft fire forced pilots to take evasive action, scattering paratroopers across a 25-mile radius instead of concentrated drop zones. Equipment bundles landed in flooded fields, drowning in water that German engineers had deliberately channeled across the Norman countryside. Allied intelligence underestimated German ability to mobilize reserves rapidly. German Field Marshal Rommel had spent months reinforcing the Atlantic Wall, and despite heavy aerial bombardment that dropped over 10,000 tons of explosives in the weeks before D-Day, many bunkers and machine gun nests remained untouched. The concrete fortifications, some with walls 6 feet thick, absorbed direct hits and kept firing. Historian Anthony Beevor, in his book D-Day, The Battle for Normandy, points out, "The Allies misjudged both the weather and the timing of German counterattacks. Intelligence reports suggested German morale was cracking, but frontline units remained fanatically determined to defend every meter of French soil." Did the Allies overlook the psychological tenacity of German defenders? What would have happened if every beach sector had faced maximum resistance from fully alerted, perfectly positioned troops? The German defensive doctrine and initial response. The Germans planned to defeat the invasion at the water's edge. "We must stop them on the beaches. If we cannot, we will lose France in a matter of weeks," Rommel wrote to Berlin in May 1944. This wasn't mere rhetoric. Rommel understood that once Allied forces established a secure beachhead with their overwhelming material superiority, German defeat would become inevitable. The Germans had layered defenses designed by military engineers who'd studied every possible invasion scenario.
anti-tank obstacles jutting from the sand at precise angles, millions of mines buried along probable approach routes, sprawling machine gun nests with interlocking fields of fire, and artillery hidden in chateaux and farmhouses that dominated the beaches below. Every bunker had been positioned to cover the blind spots of neighboring positions. Obergefreiter Karl Wegener, machine gunner at Omaha, later wrote, "When the first wave came in, I thought for a moment it would be impossible for them to get through. They were packed so tightly in their landing craft. We just kept firing into the mass. I didn't aim at individuals. There was no need. Every burst found targets." Rommel's fierce emphasis on local counterattacks meant German units were authorized to focus fire and move reserves swiftly without waiting for orders from higher command. Battalion and company commanders could commit their forces immediately upon detecting the invasion, a radical departure from the rigid German command structure that typically required approval from multiple levels of hierarchy. The defensive positions had been constructed with brutal efficiency. Czech hedgehogs, steel anti-tank obstacles weighing hundreds of pounds, were positioned to rip the bottoms from landing craft. Wooden stakes, each topped with a Teller mine, created underwater forests designed to detonate against hulls. Concertina wire, some of it electrified, created barriers that would funnel attackers into predetermined kill zones. The Rommel papers and testimony from surviving German officers underscored just how close they came to overwhelming the beachheads. Post-war interviews revealed that many German commanders believed complete victory was within their grasp during those first crucial hours. Omaha Beach, the bloody proving ground. Omaha Beach almost became the graveyard of Operation Overlord. In the first 2 hours, over 2,400 American troops fell, killed, wounded, or missing. The beach became a charnel house where survival seemed to depend more on luck than skill or courage. Sergeant William E. Gibson described, "The water was red. My men died all around me. The Germans kept firing from bunkers we couldn't see, even after our tanks sank in the surf. Bodies floated past me. Some men just gave up and drowned themselves rather than face that beach. I don't blame them. I thought about it too." The 29th Infantry Division, landing in the first wave, suffered catastrophic casualties. Entire companies ceased to exist as organized units within minutes of reaching the beach. Officers died first, deliberately targeted by German marksmen who'd been trained to recognize rank insignia even at distance. Without leadership, men huddled behind beach obstacles, paralyzed by the intensity of fire. German defenders exploited every mistake, concentrating fire on gaps in the beach obstacles, mowing down squads as they tried to cross open sand. Unseen snipers picked off officers, sowing chaos and destroying the command structure that held units together. Machine gunners worked in teams, with one firing while another changed barrels that glowed red from sustained fire. The pre-invasion bombardment had failed catastrophically at Omaha. Heavy bombers, flying through thick clouds, released their payloads too late, pounding empty fields miles inland, while German bunkers remained untouched. The Navy destroyers firing from thousands of yards offshore couldn't achieve the precision needed to knock out fortified positions. The Germans waited patiently, watching the barrage land harmlessly, knowing their moment would come. Historian John Keegan wrote, "Omaha Beach was a near-run thing. A handful of men, desperate and determined, kept the mission alive. If a single German battalion had reinforced the defenders in that first hour, the entire operation might have collapsed." How did ordinary soldiers conquer the terror of chaos and keep pushing forward when everything rational told them to retreat? Can you imagine being among the first to set foot on that deadly sand, watching friends die around you, knowing you'd probably be next?
The German counterattack that almost worked. Why didn't the Germans throw every reserve into the fight? Here lies a twist of fate that would shape the entire war. Hitler, asleep in the Reich Chancellery in Berchtesgaden, refused to release the armored panzer divisions until midday. No major moves without my command, he declared before retiring, and his staff feared his infamous rages too much to wake him. The Führer had convinced himself the Normandy landings were a feint, that the real invasion would strike at Pas-de-Calais. General Geyer von Schweppenberg, commander of Panzer Group West, later lamented, "Had we received orders at dawn, the Allies might have been driven into the sea. Our tanks were ready, our crews were experienced, we just needed permission to move. Every hour we waited, the Allied beachhead grew stronger." The 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend and Panzerlehr Division sat idle, their commanders listening to reports of the invasion with growing frustration. These weren't inexperienced troops. They were elite formations with veteran officers and modern equipment. Their presence on the beaches at dawn could have been decisive. Still, local commanders acted. Feldwebel Otto Funk's accounts describe, "We gathered what men we could, stormed toward the breach, and at times Allied troops were nearly encircled. I saw Americans surrendering, saw others retreating into the water. We thought we were winning. We thought we could push them back." Small battle groups, formed from whatever forces were immediately available, launched furious counterattacks. A company from the 352nd Infantry Division nearly reached Omaha Beach around 10 a.m., getting close enough that American troops could hear German commands being shouted. Only concentrated naval fire, with destroyers risking running aground to get closer, stopped the assault. Historical source: Decision in Normandy by Carlo de Este presents German war diaries showing they deployed local battle groups within hours, causing heavy casualties and near collapse on several sectors. One entry from a regimental commander reads, "Americans falling back, will destroy beachhead by 1400 hours. It never happened, but it nearly did. Question for the audience. What if the German panzers had attacked at 7 a.m. instead of afternoon? Would history have written a different ending to D-Day? Would we live in a different world today? Allied mistakes, the chaotic airborne operations. Paratrooper drops before dawn were a logistical disaster that nearly compromised the entire invasion. Due to navigation errors, heavy winds, and murderous anti-aircraft fire, thousands of paratroopers from the 101st and 82nd Airborne landed miles from their targets. Private Joe Belkowski remembered, "I landed alone, miles from my unit, and spent hours just trying to find another American in the dark. I heard German patrols. I heard screaming. I didn't know if the invasion had failed, if I should surrender, or if I should just try to survive until morning." Some paratroopers drowned in flooded fields, weighted down by over 100 pounds of equipment. Others landed in towns occupied by alert German units and were killed before reaching the ground. Entire plane loads disappeared, their fate unknown until bodies were discovered weeks later in remote hedgerows. German defenders, stunned at first by the aerial assault, coordinated counterattacks quickly. Many paratroopers were killed or captured before linking up with their units. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Cole, who would earn the Medal of Honor, landed with only a fraction of his battalion and spent the first hours of D-Day gathering scattered men.
6 Days of Lightning, the Battle for Normandy, highlights how in some sectors, German units used camouflage and local knowledge to surround scattered Americans. One German report described hunting paratroopers like partridges in the darkness, using trained dogs and intimate knowledge of the Norman countryside. Yet the chaos created unexpected advantages. German commanders received reports of paratroopers everywhere, exaggerating Allied strength and creating confusion about invasion objectives. This dispersion, while costly, prevented Germans from concentrating their response. Imagine being dropped alone behind enemy lines in complete darkness, unable to find your unit, not knowing if the invasion succeeded or failed. What would you do first? Would you hide? Search for others? Try to complete your mission alone.
Forgotten German acts of resistance. Not every German followed orders blindly. War reveals human complexity that propaganda rarely acknowledges. Platoon leader Helmuth Langendorf refused, against orders, to fire on what he believed were medics treating wounded Americans. He wrote in his memoirs, "War can make monsters of men, but even here we could choose honor. I saw the Red Cross armbands. I ordered my men to hold fire. My sergeant argued. I held firm. Some choices define who we are." Documented in With the Enemy in Normandy by Frederick J. Lane, some German soldiers surrendered earlier than expected, defying Nazi command out of exhaustion or moral conviction. One Wehrmacht corporal interviewed after the war explained, "We knew the war was lost. Why kill more Americans who would probably treat us decently? Why die for a regime that had already destroyed Germany?" Not all resistance was ethical. Some Germans fought with desperate fanaticism born from propaganda claiming Allied forces would commit atrocities. SS units, particularly the 12th SS Panzer Division, committed war crimes against captured Allied soldiers, executing prisoners in violation of international law. What had history turned? Military analysts calculate that if Rommel's panzer divisions had arrived 4 hours earlier, Allied bridgeheads could have been destroyed or severely compressed. Computer simulations run by military historians suggest German armor attacking at dawn might have inflicted 40 to 60% casualties on Allied forces and potentially forced evacuation. Anthony Beaver writes, "The German response, while hampered, came closer than most realized to blunting a century-shaping moment. We remember D-Day as an inevitable Allied victory. It wasn't. It was desperately close. Consider the cascading consequences of failure. No liberation of France in 1944. Potential German deployment of advanced weapons, including jet aircraft and possibly atomic research. A prolonged war extending into 1946 or beyond. And possibly separate Soviet and Western occupations of Germany with no demarcation line agreed upon. Do we underestimate how fragile historical turning points really are? Does our knowledge of outcomes blind us to how uncertain everything was to those living through it? Conclusion. D-Day succeeded by the slimmest margin. The German response, local counterattacks, hidden defenses, and brutal resistance brought Allied troops perilously close to disaster. Only through errors by Hitler, improvisation by Allied soldiers, and luck did history tip toward victory. Looking back, Eisenhower later said, "If I failed, the only thing I could do was to go to London and offer my resignation." He'd already drafted the failure message. The troops, the air and navy did all that bravery and devotion to duty could do. If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone. Victory was anything but guaranteed. The men who stormed those beaches understood the odds. They went anyway. That remains the most remarkable fact of all. What part of the German response do you think is most overlooked? Would the world look different today if just a few decisions had changed? Discuss in the comments below.